Regardless of which project you're choosing for this module, everyone needs to know how to write a resume. So in this video, I'm going to give you some short tips and tricks to help you get started with resume writing. What is the purpose of a resume? It is a marketing tool. It's going to summarize your skills, your experience, your education. Really, the main purpose of a resume is to get noticed, so you get an interview. Some other reasons people write resumes include scholarships, or maybe to get into graduate school, or it may be part of a portfolio. Studies show that recruiters spend about 7 seconds looking at a resume, so you really want to make sure that not only is your resume professional, but it is also visually appealing. What are some steps you can take to prepare to write a resume? You need to come up with a list of the skills that you have, the qualifications that you have, all of your accomplishments. Really make sure though that you're looking at the job posting and you want your resume to reflect, if you have them, those skills and abilities that they're looking for in that job. There are different formats that you can use for a resume. If you have a lot of work experience, most people choose a chronological format, and what that does is it lists your most recent work experiences and then it works backwards from there. Now, if you are a student with little work experience, you probably want to use a functional resume. What that's going to do is going to highlight your education and your skills first, and then it's going to show that work experience towards the bottom because it may or may not relate to the position in which you're applying. And then some people do a combination of both of these two. What sections could you include in a resume? You should always have a header, which we'll talk about in a second. A lot of people will include an objective or a summary statement next. If you're a student, typically you put your education next because that's most likely directly related to the position in which you are applying. Now, if you have experience in the field you are applying, that would probably go underneath your objective and your header. And then any skills or activities or honors or awards, there's multiple other sections you could include in a resume. A lot of times students will ask, how long should my resume be? 1 to 2 pages is usually max. Actually, you really don't want to spread it out any further because kind of the shorter it is page length wise, probably the fuller it's going to look when you visually take a look at that resume. So let's talk about a header. What should you include? Your name, your address, your phone number, a professional email. If you don't have a professional email address, create one. If you have any LinkedIn or social media that is relevant to the position, you could include that as well. You want your header to stand out. You want it to be visually appealing. My suggestion, which I'm going to mention in a minute, is to use a template to help you out there. An objective or a summary statement is usually short. So an objective is usually 1 to 2 short sentences. Summaries are usually 3 to 6, and that's usually if you have a lot of work experience. You want to tailor that objective to the company. So it's always great to put the company's name in your objective statement or something that you've researched about the company that you could put in your objective statement. Really makes it stand out. Usually objective statements, you try to steer clear of personal pronouns. So I, me, my. You can read this objective example here. Notice it doesn't say I am a recent college graduate. It just starts out with recent college graduate. And again, it's short. It's just giving this tiny snippet of who you are. My suggestion is research objective statements for that particular career. So for example, if you are getting a career in welding, Google welding objective statements and take a look at some examples to give you an idea. Now, your education section should include the name of your school. It should include your most recent education first. So for the majority of you, that's going to be Carteret Community College. You want to give the location, the degree you obtained or seeking. So if you haven't graduated yet, you can put anticipated graduation and then give the date that you anticipate graduating. You can include your GPA. If it's not the greatest of GPAs, then you don't have to include it. Now, a lot of times students will make their education sections a little bit longer because they usually don't have work experience that relates to the position they're applying. Well, you definitely probably have coursework experience that relates, so include those courses. Include any projects that you did that relate to that position you're applying. Include any awards or anything leadership-wise that you did while here. Now, you only usually include high school if you haven't graduated college yet. Once you graduate college, you typically take that out of your education section. Now, your work experience section. Now, a lot of students will ask, well, maybe I haven't had like a quote unquote real job. Well, you can include internships here. You can include student organizations. You can include volunteer or community service. Things you want to list here: the company name, the location, when did you work, the dates, the job title. Then you usually will put a bulleted list of what duties that you have performed. You want it to be really easy to be able to read, because people aren't going to read this word for word. They're going to be glancing at it. Start each sentence with an action verb. Don't use personal pronouns, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. If it's a present tense, like you're currently doing that job, use present tense. If it's past tense, use past tense. So an example here, the student has listed they were a lab assistant. They put where they were a lab assistant. The date would go over there on the right hand side. And then I really want you to look at these bullet points here. It doesn't say I worked, it just says worked. Or then it says developed or performed or prepared or operated. So you always want to start with an action verb. So I have listed for you under the lesson resources this week a huge list of action verbs. So that way, if you're stuck on where to start, any one of these words would be great. Now, a lot of times students will include a skill section. You want at least a one-page resume, one full-page resume. So if you don't have a lot of work experience, make a skills section. So do you have computer skills, leadership skills, communication skills? Look at some example resumes that really focus on skills. So for example, this one here, notice their professional experience may not directly relate to the position. So what they've done is they've put a skills summary at the top. Now, where should these skills come from? It should come from the job description. So whatever skills they're looking for, if you have them, then highlight them in your resume. Definitely take a look at some example resumes in your field before you get started. This is really going to, especially if you've never written a resume before, it's not like writing a personal essay. It's completely different. So look at some example resumes. I gave a link this module to a resume of a recent college graduate, because I know it's very difficult if you don't have a lot of work experience. You're like, well, what do I put? So I gave you that link. Take a look at it. That way it'll give you some ideas. I would not suggest trying to write a resume from scratch. Again, it's not an essay. Use a template. So I have linked under the lesson resources for this module free templates that you can download, and that way you just plug in your information. The work has been done, it's formatted, it's beautiful, it's professional, it's visually appealing. You just have to plug in your information. So make sure to take a look at those tools. And then last but not least, make sure you always proofread. One thing that's a huge turnoff for employers is going to be, misspellings or punctuation, formatting. You've got extra spaces in there. Make sure you have somebody else take a look at your resume before submitting it to an employer.